Okay. So now let's chat about everything I just said.
What kind of studies have ever been done that you're aware of that measures individual quality of health in, say, Micronesia compared to Alaska,
Well,
or different areas where it might indicate the level of life?
so there are different zones where people live longer. The problem is oh, I'm sorry. The question is, how many studies have been done, if I'm rephrasing this properly, like how many studies have been done on people living longer, but quality of life? Well, here's the trouble with studies. If you just look at pure age, then you get into quality, like, because you can artificially keep people alive, like by hooking them up to it. You can have somebody live a really long time in a coma, and it doesn't necessarily mean that the quality is very good, which is why you're saying quality. The problem is quality is extremely relative. So the interesting thing is that the better your mitochondria function, the more you can do wrong and have more fun. So
If they're in areas of more light, they don't have to do as much. So there should be a measurable difference in people doing pretty much the same things at the same age in different areas.
the different factors that we have to deal with now is tech. Because if you're in a high light environment and next to a 5G tower, so the question then becomes, when would the studies be done? Modern times or historically?
Or in controlled environments.
And I'm going to say, unfortunately, we don't have there's no control, which is why people hate the stuff. Like the talk I just gave is disruptive for health measurement, because I just made it very relative, where literally, like, I'm saying it's not fixed. You know what I mean? Your electron expression within your mitochondria can't be quantified. That's why quanta is a variable. So you can't quantify a variable, which is why it's so funny to me. Do you mean? Because we can't measure this. That's the struggle, is that it's almost impossible. And that's why, for me, if you ask me, well, where should I live? We talk about this, like, if we were going to move somewhere, where would we move? And we think, well, we got to take the light environment into account, so probably moving north wouldn't be ideal. But then we got to take population density, aka amount of tech, into account. We got to look at, like, practical things, like the higher the population, the more economic opportunity there is. So that's a trade-off. You see what I mean? Then our goal becomes, is it longevity, or is it, you see what I mean? Like, for me, if I'm in the longevity phase of life, some people are willing to sacrifice their longevity for function, in terms of being strong and doing those things. Like, if you say to a cage fighter, hey, if you keep cage fighting, it's going to shorten your life, and they're willing to say X amount of money and X amount of pleasure, I'm willing to sacrifice my life for those things. I would not. But who am I to say? If you took cage fighting away from a cage fighter, their quality of life from their perspective would be very, very low. They'd be miserable. Another example. A lot of cage fighters would measure health based on how much weight they can lift. You see what I mean? So other people would measure it based on my measure for, I'm saying all these things are relevant. I'm just not one to say what quality is. So I have to decide for me the same way everybody can. But anyone who would say, I have a study that shows, I would write off the study. Which is why on my blog, I don't think I've referenced one study ever, because not that they don't have any value, but studies for me are maps that give you a direction, not a destination.
could you speak to the actual reason why? Give some examples maybe of a couple of kind of case studies that you'd say could be done. Yet, what are the issues that basically say that it's not worthwhile?
So here's the only problem is that I can't figure out how to do studies. So because I can't figure out how to do objective studies, people who say they've figured out how to do objective studies, I question that. Because if I were going to do a study on people in this room and I wanted to prove, that it's better to be in this room than outside of it, I could rig that study. And that's why a lot of stuff in health is very, very rigged. As you know, in the mainstream health world, they'll do 10 studies, pick the one that supports the conclusion that they want, ditch the other 9. How do we determine studies? Well, we take factors, we adjust these factors, we make it controlled. My whole thing is that the information that I put out is terrible for business for everybody. So I'm not making a massive amount of money off of anything because it's terrible for business. If I tell you that if you go outside in the sun, that the blood in your body will raise to the surface of your solar panel called your skin to collect frequency information as a wireless frequency device to collect light frequency, and then your nitric oxide will increase and it will circulate that light information throughout the body on the iron in your blood. Well, I just changed the chemistry of your blood with light. What else is in that blood? Well, the food that you ate that got broken down. Now I just changed food in your blood based on the light environment. So now if I do blood work, does the light environment matter? Shoot, well, I just disrupted all blood work that's ever been done in human history. So that's a difficult thing, right? For blood work, well, that's how much health is dictated by blood work. You know what I mean? And people are measuring vitamin D, then they may take supplemental vitamin D to test and see if it's there. I would say, well, sure, if you measure and something's not in your body and then you put it in your body and measure and see if it's in your body and find it, that doesn't equate to health, but it's a measurement, you see what I mean? So that's the misunderstanding of health in the modern age with our measurements is that you can, that's where the keto people, I love ketosis in a certain context. I don't think ketones are essentially inherently good. So people measure their ketones with a pee strip. That's what their body's excreting as waste. So they say, I don't have an excess of ketones. Now, if you stop eating glucose and stay alive, then you're in ketosis, period, right? But if you drink ketones and then do a test strip to see how many ketones you're wasting, it will increase. So I literally tell people, is that a good measurement? You know what I mean? Like you drank the thing and then peed it out, measured the pee, you wasted a lot of ketones that you drank. It has nothing to do with the function of ketones in the body. Same with the different things like vitamin D and all these different measurements. It's very, very disruptive. It's also easy to sell keto strips. Was if I tell you that measurement is not very useful in terms of establishing the benefits of being in a ketogenic state, which I'm not opposed to, but that's where I would love if the devices and the tests and the different things that are marketed, and that's my big beef is with things as solutions for EMF. I wish they worked. I wish I could put a little dot on my phone and have it block the Wi-Fi. But the truth is if I put the dot on my phone and the phone still works, I know it's not blocking frequency because the phone is a receiver transmitter. So if it's receiving and transmitting frequency still, then it clearly hasn't blocked the frequency or the transmission. Now, how many EMF little dots are being sold to block phones? Tons of them. You see how ridiculous it is, right? If the phone works, then it clearly isn't blocking. Well, if you put it in a Faraday box or a cloth and it doesn't work anymore, meaning you can't get a call, then you know it worked because it doesn't receive the frequency, meaning it blocked it. But if you put anything on your phone and it still works, then it clearly didn't work in terms of blocking frequency. So the pendants, people sell EMF pendants, they sell EMF discs and I'll just get a disc, or the worst are frequency devices to block frequency. It's like,
Now they're actually making silver threading.
yes, and this, I'm glad you said this, because I want, yes, here's the problem, okay, is that this building right here, if you look around, has one big opening, right? You can hear my voice echo, so the light is shining in. This is now a container for that light. Meaning if you yell in a cave, your voice is a frequency, it echoes. It just is stuck in there. It'll reverberate as a frequency. So if you have an open Faraday cage called an EMF blocking hoodie, then it enters in the hole and then contains frequency inside it. It's the worst idea ever. So it is a scam. Anything that's open, in terms of an open cage is not a cage. It's a fun room to hang out in. Okay, so this is an important piece of the EMF conversation that people are not, and the other thing is that if it plugs into a wall and emits a frequency, then it clearly is not the solution to things that plug into a wall and emit a frequency. So my big thing a few years ago is there was a guy that was selling pyramid night lights for $400 that were said would emit frequencies that would block Wi-Fi, clear chemtrails, heal every illness you have. Everything in an AC wall plug is alternating current, emits a variable frequency, like the variable is based on what's in the wall plug that's powering the thing. It's AC, it's not syncing with your body's variable frequency. It is destructive. It's as bad as, he's saying, put this next to your bed. It's just as bad as putting your cell phone next to your bed. Well, at least it would be DC. At least it's DC. Yeah. That's an upgrade. But you can see how the EMF story is going to be, we did have our home measured by an EMF guy that came out. Do you know what I mean? There are ways. The best things to do for EMFs is to avoid it, shut off your tech. You know what I mean? That's the best thing to do, is kill breakers at night. Night is when it matters. Just know that mitochondria are affected by frequencies because they emit frequencies. So this is how, they're your little EMF devices. Your little EMF devices interact poorly with unnatural EMF devices.
Yeah, even your clock radio.
Yeah, totally. So now you see why the tests are so difficult, because in the modern age, how many devices are you surrounded by to measure your health? You see what I mean? Like people with a Fitbit on, like there's different devices that will measure your sleep wirelessly. Well, I'm saying that the function of the device is actually altering the outcome of the test. Of course, because when you sleep, you emit a frequency. That frequency is now interacting with this frequency. Now you don't have the same health. It's being diminished by the measuring device.
What if they shut it off at night? Does it sync? It syncs when they turn it back on in the morning. Yeah. Well, and that's the whole thing, is that if it's shut off, it just won't do the sleep measurements. Do you know what I mean? Well, it will actually draw it in the morning.
Yes. Yeah, I'm talking about, like, for example, like modern day, your heart, very mitochondrially dense, meaning very electromagnetic, right? Heart palpitations and heartbeats that are off is extremely common. I got into all this health because I was in an apartment where when I would lay down to go to sleep, my heart would beat off time, and it was creepy, and I could feel it. I was sleeping on the other side of a wall with 5 smart meters on it. So literally my electromagnetic heart was being hacked frequency-wise by that, and it was beating in time with the device, regardless of my physical body. So that's real, you see what I mean? So now no doctor was going to tell me that. They would give me a device that would emit a frequency to track the frequency beat of my heart while I sleep, and never ask what's on the other side of the wall. Exactly, that's why I'm trying to tell people, with your heart stuff, with your brain stuff, with your your depression, your anxiety, your inability to sleep. See, sleep requires a massive amount of charge. That's why you're not supposed to be moving around when you're asleep. Because during the day, your charge goes into your arms and your legs and your function and your da-da-da-da-da-da. When you sleep, all that gets disengaged and it activates your brain, where the astrocyte cells in your brain communicate a spectrum frequency to your disengaged body to tell the dividing cells what to become, how to heal, how to repair, all these things, right? So that's why the charge of that mechanism, it requires so much charge that you can't be engaged while you're doing it. You see what I mean? So you have to shut everything off to let the power shift over into this. In the same way, I always think of it like, a restaurant, when it's open, it's hopping and going, and then when the closed sign, you would do the opposite. You clean and refill and do all these other mechanisms. You can never clean a stove you're cooking on. It's very, very, you can't clean a pan that you're cooking in. So it's just kind of the same mechanisms, but it's a charge story because the energy that you output during the day has to be shifted towards that thing. And that's why if you're low energy, you won't sleep, because the low charge doesn't allow your brain to engage those functions that have to shut off your conscious mind in order to be engaged. So low charge people have sleep issues. Sleep issues reduce your charge, and it creates this cycle that we find ourselves in modern times, where nobody can sleep without chemicals, which is why everybody's on melatonin and THC and alcohol and pharmaceutical drugs and all kinds of stuff. But to naturally sleep is a tell that you're low charge. Most people wouldn't think that, in terms of your ability to sleep. But it's really a charge story. It's really a mitochondrial issue. So that's where I'm saying the root of all diseases is mitochondrial disease. When mitochondrial disease affects charge in the body. So that's where especially heart and brain issues. So if you have a mood disorder, you probably have a charge issue. Different things like that people don't necessarily correlate. Like they don't necessarily think joint pain means I got a charge issue. They don't necessarily think depression is low charge. You see what I mean? Psychological conditions, right? You would treat that with chemicals as if you had a chemical deficiency. Most people do not have chemical deficiencies. They have a low charge where the body won't make use of the chemicals because the charge isn't high enough to make use of them. So it does not require them. You see what I mean? Because the body doesn't keep anything it can't use. So if you sever something within your arm, your body won't keep that fully engaged. It'll use its power optimally however it can. So if you're not using it, you'll lose it. You put your leg in a cast and the body, it pulls the energy intelligently away from that because it's not being used. So you're telling your body, get rid of this, pull the energy somewhere else. The higher your energy, the more you'll maintain the different things. You see what I mean? But that's why you don't use it, you lose it kind of a thing. But that's where the lower your charge, the less ability you have to make those decisions about what you use. You see what I mean? Which is why different protocols within your body relative to health are completely contingent upon the charge margin that you have access to at any given moment. This is the story of health. And that's where the exercise story is the piezoelectric effect, basically where through motion, your collagen biofeedbacks increase charge to increase your energy. That's why exercise matters. Do you know what I mean? It's why you don't just expend energy and lose it. When you exercise, you gain energy from the motion. That's why exercise matters, but that's why if you get in a low charge scenario, then you don't necessarily have the charge margin to engage the piezoelectric effect in the way that you would, and then you see all these things affect each other biologically. Unfortunately, so many people are focused on the aesthetic and on the peripheral of the body, being the arms and the legs. They're not focused at all on the brain and the heart. That's largely what the body cares about. It's built to focus on the brain and the heart. That's why you have the most mitochondria in the brain and the heart. You can lose an arm, you can't lose a heart. You can lose a leg, you can't lose a brain. So the body knows this. See, the body's intelligence is one of the communication of mitochondria is constantly saying, how much energy can you guys make and where do we put it? And we tell it with our actions where we want it to focus that energy. But at the same time, it will only listen to us until it becomes a detriment to the brain and the heart, and then it will override. Then you can't, even if you want good joints and a lousy heart, your body won't do it. So our body lets us control some things consciously, and some things are wired into our brain to work despite our consciousness, which is why you can't just decide, oh, I think I'll make my heart stop pumping now. Ding! Like you've got to actually engage in an aggressive override to do that. You know what I mean? Because our consciousness, our body is literally wired where that evolved first, and the prefrontal cortex came second. So we can't shut off our heart and brain in the way that we can just not use our hand, because the body says the hand's not all that important in the whole grand scheme of being alive. You see what I mean? So that's kind of the charge mitochondria health connection, but it's hard to, in the modern world, all these neurological and cardiac diseases that we're seeing that are being treated with all kinds of chemicals, natural or unnatural, aren't addressing the issue of charge, which is the issue of those two organs first. So it's putting the cart before the horse, because chemistry comes after physics. You see what I mean? And so that's why, like, any doctor who's not, like, there's cardiologists or whatever, like there's alternative docs that focus all their attention on, that were heart docs. There's one that I think of that's very popular, heart cardiologist, right? High level MD cardiologist, when alternative, is focused completely on like lectins and olive oil. I didn't want to say his name. Okay. Not a bad guy, but I'm thinking all I talk about is mitochondria, charge, when I talk about the heart, because I know that the heart is just a container for mitochondria. So is the things he's saying true? Yeah. Are they relevant in an EMF world? Probably not. They're just, because the heart doctor should be talking about what the heart is made of, which is literally charge, like electromagnetic charge. So if I have the opportunity to do a talk, I do it on electromagnetics. I don't do it on the benefits of olive oil, even though olive oil is beneficial. And it is. Well, I mean, it's
On some level, it's like, like when you go to kindergarten, I'm just trying to hit you in one place to get you over there. Now, he may not always have a bridge, but where he's getting people is far better than where they were.
Sure.
So
I mean, there's
it's like anything else. You take, nobody has all the answers, okay? So, but you got to start something. So that's Gundry. I mean,
sure.
It's okay.
Yeah, I mean, I think any message of improvement is positive. So I'm not saying he's an idiot, and that's why I didn't name him or whatever. I'm just saying that for me, my focus when I talk about the heart is the electromagnetics. The reason it's my focus is because I feel it's neglected by the alternative health community. I think the amount of conversation about nutrients for the brain and heart is extremely lacking, or that the real story of electromagnetics is lacking compared to those things. So my mission is to balance that out and give people the thing. So I'm not saying that lectins are good. I'm just saying that I wish someone with a cardiologist platform would say what's in the heart that powers it.
But
And
isn't like a lot of the mitochondria stuff that you're finding is that it's dealing with how do we deal with the container as opposed to deal with content. It's because they've confused the content or the container as the content.
Yes, and that is my focus in life. Like I told someone earlier today, I'm not concerned with words, I'm concerned with meaning. Words are just the container for meaning. So I know I don't care what word you use. I'm not interested in a semantic idea. I'm interested in the meaning that the word contains. That's why, like, same thing for me. I'm not interested necessarily in this. I want to go a level deeper and see, well, what does it contain? This is the meaning, right? That's expressing itself. So that's why the real meaning for me of health is light retention. It is health and life is the amount of light that is contained within this container called your body. That for me is quality. So when you ask me what quality is, quality of life, I would say, how much light do you contain? That has everything to do with how well your mitochondria function. You see what I mean? For someone else, that is not the case. And that's okay. I'm just here to shine a light on my perspective because I think that it's something that's referenced way more in spiritual circles or new age circles or alternative health circles that aren't necessarily like making it legit science. Like, this is a legitimate scientific explanation of how the heart works and why the heart and the mind were so spiritually significant is because they contain the most light. And I mean literal, physical, measurable electromagnetics. So it's a story not told, and that's why if you Google mitochondria, you're going to hear all about NAD. You're going to hear every alt guy in health, and are they leading people to the mitochondria? Yes. Great. I'm not saying they're bad guys. I'm just saying let's not stop there. Let's follow through. Now we figured out what the shuttle is within the mitochondria for electrons. Now let's figure out what's an electron. Well, the reason everyone skirts that is because it can't be bottled, pilled, packaged, powdered. It's a quantum. It's light. So you can't. So that's where it gets far more difficult because you can't own it. You know what I mean? You can't control it. It's volatile. It is not the thing that is easily packaged and sold. It is the truth of the thing. And that's why it's what I'm concerned with is always the truth of the thing you know what I mean? That's why some of you guys have talked to me, I'm really like approaching this science story from a Gnostic perspective in terms of just being a seeker of truth, and quantum is spiritual science. There's no getting around it because there's no words to explain the subatomic outside of like spiritual stuff. Spiritual meaning non-physical. Like, that's just how I define it. Conceptual, non-material. Well, that's what material is made of, and I know how. The physical world is made by the conceptual world. The conceptual world is made of light, and light converts itself into the material world through a process of electron chain transfer. So this is...
It's really though, because this is what I've heard personally, as far as your frustration with supplements and looking at what people have called the content when it's really the container. What you're really saying is the lifestyle, right? It's basically how you're interacting with that light and with that EMF on the outside in the sun. So that's to me more of a lifestyle type of solution.
Yeah.
Rather than let's stop giving it a drug, giving it a supplement. Let's see what we're actually doing and how we're relating with these things.
Yeah, I would say my focus on it is to try to I just want to understand how it all really works. So, and I think that the danger is with a lot of the things that people offer is that they're distractions from the real truth of the thing. So sometimes, and that's why I did so much of that stuff where, once you realize what nature is and what you are, a lot of our shiny solutions aren't really all that great. Do you know what I mean? It's a shiny button on a phone that blocks EMF and it doesn't actually do anything, but it's so sparkly, you know what I mean, that we love the shiny stuff, but that's why I think I wrote once that I think I said I bought a $400 electromagnetic frequency device that can be wired up anywhere on the planet that will, that will provide certain electromagnetic frequencies where it consumes frequency and converts it into chemical compounds that I can utilize for energy and expresses, its waste as consumable chemistry that allows me to survive and all this stuff. I went deep with it and then just said it's a tree, people. Like it's a tree. You know what I mean? Like trees are they're electromagnetic. They're grounded frequency devices that eat light and convert it into sugars called photosynthesis. You know what I mean? That like they emit oxygen. This is like high level biotech here. And so are we. And our bodies are more complex than that tree in terms of our biotech abilities, because we have a brain and a heart and the different things that the tree does not. So people diminish themselves by their focus on external shiny things. They don't look inward and see, oh, I am that. Like I contain everything that technology has to offer is already, it's a very shabby, poor, ignorant person's rendition of human life and of nature. But we look at things as primitive. My belief, strong belief, is that the most advanced civilizations in human history left no mark because they were so entrenched in their environment that they were indistinguishable from it, because everything that is perfect disappears. Everything that is flawed becomes visible. If you can see your eye, it's broken. If you hear your ear buzzing, it's broken. If you see the floaty in your eye, that's a problem. It's impairing vision, you see what I mean? Perfect things disappear right away. So that's the message of nature, is that if you can't see the forest from the trees, that's because nature did it right.
Well, that's actually where science is merging with spirituality and nature, because what they concluded through the genetic testing is that when it's thoroughly tested, the human body, it's 99% what's out here in the environment and 1% human.
Well, and that's gets all into epigenetics. You know what I mean? And the interesting thing about like the epigenetic story is that the environment dictates the expression of the gene, but it's a combination of the internal and external environment, meaning the little sun and the big sun, the electron and the big sun, are both influencing this thing called you.
Right.
And yeah.
Birds with that natural environment, that's our medicine.
Right. And that's why it's not to say all or nothing, but it's to allow everyone to navigate this thing however they choose. So you can decide your quality of life. The problem is that people know about big pharma, they don't know about big tech, about the dangers. They don't understand why. Like people think, oh, wireless doesn't affect you at all. Well, that's because they don't know anything about electromagnetic frequency or themselves, how their mitochondria work. Which is why the mitochondrial alt health people talking about mitochondria that don't tell the story of the frequency bug me to no end, not because they're not leading people in the right direction, but because they're not telling the whole story. And yes, it is very difficult because we're utilizing the very tech that we're opposing. So that's also like a tricky thing to navigate, because here I am, like I'm going to post this online. Do you know what I mean? It's not, yeah, totally. So it's all a choice. That's why quality is subjective. The problem is people really don't know. So when they're Googling health solutions glued to a screen, they don't know that it's causing the effect. So that's the problem. That's why I'm telling the messages, because I didn't know. I did every alt health thing under the sun and didn't get better. So I just feel this thing of like I tried everything. Oh, I mean, I had tried everything that alt health had to offer, and no one told me a thing about what's inside this thing.
We're so programmed to think our solutions are Alzheimer's.
Yeah.
So we will go to the health food store and pick up all these supplements. We will go to Google and listen to all these people, because we will not tune into what we're feeling when we are doing something.
Yeah. Right. And that's where, I don't know if you're here, but basically your intuitive nature is that mitochondrial story of your inner light, basically. So and that's why DNA is being manipulated by these things. But that's why, for me, I truly believe that there's the inner environment and the outer environment, and that the activation of the inner environment is contingent on the deactivation of the outer environment. Meaning that as water goes away out here, inner water has to activate, and we create that inner water in the electron chain transfer process. That's why I told you where water's created. So you know, like, what's that?
Where does it go? What's the function once you
Its function is to be the conductive battery for charge. It is a liquid crystalline substance that conducts electricity in a magnetic field. So it is the battery that charge uses to express itself in chemical form. That's why water is such a unique substance. But that's where I believe that as outer light and the outer environment goes away, the inner light and inner environment needs to activate, and it will, just for a small group of people. So it's like everyone looking out for solutions, and not to say there's no solutions in the environment and all these things, but I truly believe that it is the focus on these inner things. So instead of this thing looking out for, you know what I mean? It's about going and saying, okay, let me go down here, because I think inside the mitochondria, there's nothing. I almost brought a little light bulb to just put it in here, because now we've gotten to the base of the thing, which is what I'm really concerned with. Is it's really a story about, that's why mitochondria are light converters, but I'm really concerned about light itself as a semi-physical thing, you know.
And just to kind of, if I can interject, because I was at when Rob's house was tested with all this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
All the electromagnetic stuff in his house, and people talked about, we have to look inside, and you're also saying that too. But one what's interesting is, as a technology guy, a lot of this is just going back to wired. How do we stop the rain from hearing the rain on his speaker, but we wired him from here to here? How do you affect yourself being affected by this wireless environment? Is actually going back to some wireless stuff. That's some of the simplest things. Or even just what we found, just turning off the breakers. That was like
that was the biggest hack. But it's just funny how my friend the other day, he was talking to me about he's like, I want to build a house and I want to biohack it and do all these things, and I'm going to get, the morning light frequencies in the morning, and I'm going to do this, and construct it this way. And I said, dude, metal roof, wraparound porch. You're done. Because that's just like, how do you bring you see what I mean? Like, literally he was trying to think of really complex, expensive ways. I said, you know what you do if you built a house and you really wanted to hack it? You'd make your bedroom and you'd just forget to install windows and electricity in that room, and then paint it with the Wi-Fi blocking paint, and it'd be done. It'd be cheaper, right? You just do less. Like that would be the ultimate biohacked room. You know what I mean? It'd have no tech in your sleep environment. You'd have no light distortions whatsoever. I mean, it'd be so simple. But
There's a town now. There's a town where several hundred people live that are I can't remember what state it was, but they designed this town because of people that were so sensitive to that.
yeah,
And they live in this free.
I'd love to get more information on that.
Google that. I saw it on the news, I think last week.
Yeah, and that's the thing, is electromagnetic sensitivity just means that your mitochondria are not functioning well at all. So
Your shuttle be the greatest indicator of that, rather than going out, like, from what I heard you say, correct me if I'm wrong, is that shuttle will grow on its own depending on how much mitochondria
So
if it's small,
there are definitely ways to measure this stuff.
but wouldn't that be the greatest measure? I mean, the body's going to make it grow
Well,
Yeah, if it's got more
it,
growing.
it is. The problem with all measurements when it comes to the body is where you measure. Right. So the problem is that the things that matter in our body are hard to measure because it's easy to biopsy stuff that doesn't matter.
Well, I don't mean so much that. I'm going more from that holistic perspective of health, of following it all the way back to the point of origin. You're saying the point of origin is the mitochondria.
Yeah.
And people are focusing on making the shuttle bigger by adding supplements in. And I'm saying, well, what they should be doing is saying, okay, if that shuttle's that small, that means it doesn't have much to carry.
Right.
So we really don't need to know exactly how much. We know we need to make it bigger.
Right.
These are the kind of things you need to do
Right.
to develop.
Well, and I think that's why the things that are trending in health, ketogenic diets, cryotherapy, any low carb stuff, fish oils and DHA, mushrooms, all those things to me are mitochondrial stories. For example, like I take a bunch of lion's mane mushroom because I think that, well, mushrooms eat EMF, and lion's mane mushroom also will sync with my nervous system. So then being friends with that mushroom then allows me to have a better acclimation to the EMF environment than otherwise. You see what I mean? Yeah, so that's where the consumption of mushrooms, most of the society, the nice thing is that they'll intuitively just migrate towards these things.
Yeah.
People are migrating out of cities. You know what I mean? They're longing for the things on their subconscious, which is their mitochondrial level. People that are tuned in, can feel electromagnetics more. They're sensitive because they're able to hear it clearly. That's where the more dissonant frequencies are exposed to, the harder it is to tune into nature, because nature didn't have to be loud because it wasn't competing with anything for billions of years. So it could just talk in a normal tone of voice and say, hey, do this, do that, you'll be cool. You know what I mean? Now it's still talking in the same tone of voice, but it's competing with massive amounts of frequency. You should have seen the meters that the guy ran in our place. It's different when you hear the noise because it's been made audible. It's disturbing. I said, oh my gosh, you know what I mean? He says, yeah, your nervous system is getting hit with that every 10 seconds, forever. Try and relax.
We're just on your
Now,
phone
and
look at all the Wi-Fi in the area.
yeah, well, and that's where, and he told me in other places, like in big cities, he said it doesn't ever drop down. It's just, you see what I mean? So it's like, I get, the overwhelming thing is that the problem is that we're going to find out really soon the average on the bell curve, where the average human mitochondrial cliff is to fall off of, where you can take X amount of frequency before you just drop dead. We'll find it with birds. We're finding it with birds because there's a certain 5G now where saw an article 2 days ago where they turned on the 5G and the birds started dropping dead out of the sky. So now you know, those birds, their mitochondria can handle this much frequency before they die. My guess is that tech is going to find that limit and then back off just a little bit. And then they'll find out what can they live enough to pay us money for and not enough to not need our service. You see what I mean? And they'll find it. And once they find that perfect happy medium, that's where we'll balance off. It's just, sure.
We don't want to come up with a medication that'll cure that. And what we want is chronic illness so that can come back.
Well, and that's the residual income is the name of the game. You know what I mean? So,
I have a question.
yes.
The last time we were here, we mentioned that Brussels has outlawed 5G.
Uh-huh.
So when we talk about what type of research can be conducted to arrive at the conclusion, to make that type of a decision? What do they know that we don't know or don't want to know or know how to do?
Well, there's a couple things I would say. I think and this is not to be unpatriotic or anything to that effect, but in the same way that people can eat wheat, maybe if they go to Italy and then they can eat tons of bread and pasta and feel top notch, there's some things over in Europe where their standards are a little different than ours. Do you know what I mean? Same with the tech stuff, I think. You know what I mean? So we think very practically because it is overwhelming. It is a big shift, and the truth is that we all have to do the best we can with what we have. So my practical things are, first, hack your house. That's for step one. I mean, the things in the future, the real hacks, like I said, a metal roof will be very important. Ideal environment for us would be a plot of land that had tons of pine trees and a house in the middle of it with a metal roof. That's the best, you know what I mean? So, but in terms of our society and regulating this stuff in America, it's gonna take, avoid the big cities until enough people get sick and die, and then they'll shut it off. Only to the point that they have to get people to stop dropping dead, and then they'll keep it there. You see what I mean?
Speaking to that, also the technology